by Becky Hall, here to talk about some public Shakespeare and other awesomeness, which jives a lot with what we're doing with the podcast. So you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're at right now, and what the work is you're doing?
So I finished my PhD in 2016 and worked as visiting assistant professor for a year to figure out what to do. And then working on the side in grad school, doing with the education department at Chicago Shakespeare Theater, and doing performance lectures, and I was really interested in the kind of work that a theater was able to do, bridging scholarly work and the wider community. And so I applied for it and became a Mellon ACLS Fellow, which is a really, really fabulous program trying to transition recent humanities PhDs into work at government organizations, as well as nonprofits, basically, public serving nonprofits. They place people all over, about 20 fellows a year, from places ranging from the NRDC and the Feminist Press, the Field Museum in Chicago, all kinds of stuff. And I'm at the Public Theater in New York City, which runs Free Shakespeare in the Park every year, as well as lots and lots and lots of other programming. So I have two titles, Mellon ACLS Public Fellow and Strategic Communications Leader. Wow. So at the Public, I work in essentially audience engagement research and communication strategies.
And we were kind of talking about a few minutes ago, right? I think the perspective you're getting in that role compared to your experience inside the academy. So can you tell us just a little bit more about that kind of?
Sure. So I am trying to keep a foot in my scholarly life because my ultimate goal is to find better ways to bridge the academy and the public as well as public serving institutions. So that sort of triangle of different constituencies there. But right now, my day-to-day work is totally non-academic, totally non-scholarly. I'm an arts administrator in my day-to-day job at the Public. And that has been giving me a completely different perspective on Shakespeare, on scholarship, and a lot of the work that we do. Because I'm working at the intersection of development, which is the fundraising department, marketing, and the executive office. So keeping the wheels on and strategic planning. So trying to figure, I'm learning how to communicate with really, really, really broad publics. In my audience engagement and research capacity, we're trying to learn what makes audiences tick, why they value the arts, why they engage with public theater in particular, so that we can talk to them better, communicate with them better, connect with them better. And that's involved things like sending out a gigantic survey to 160,000 people. So it's very, very different from, writing a dissertation that 5 people.
Yeah.
5 people.
But it really goes to, it well situates you within the theme of the podcast, which is, this whole project sort of originated out of it's fine to come to this heady intellectual scholarly environment, but where do we take that outside of here? So we come because we work at varied institutions, but not necessarily research heavy institutions.
So we're all teaching teaching heavy institutions.
So but there's the teaching side of it, but there's also the desire to be like, I want to take what I'm interested and passionate in, and I want to tell people about it and make them interested in it too. And so it's kind of finding a way to negotiate that with people who might not necessarily be inclined to be like, yeah.
Well, how do you take something that's scholarship? How do you make academic work public service?
Yeah. Yes.
Right, which is something I'm very passionate about. And that's the hard thing to bridge because we have such great ideas here, especially at SAA. But then the next step for me is always, so what's the community angle? What's the outreach? How do you, because there's no reason why, a normal public can't understand big ideas, complicated text, right? And enjoy it, and they do. And I think it's our job to try to facilitate that, to bridge it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's interesting, and I haven't yet figured out how to really take sort of academic scholarship, research, and translate that to a really gigantic public. Because now I'm thinking about, I'm working for a large, well-established institution,
Right.
and trying to, part of it is getting more audiences to engage with it, and there's an entertainment factor there, so it's distinct from what we think of as public-facing scholarship, but the process of learning what people value, people who have no professional stake in this stuff, what they value, why they take their hard-earned money to go buy a ticket, take time out of their schedule to go watch a play, sit there, and just why the heck do they want to do that? I mean, I think it makes a lot more sense for a lot of us here at SAA and other scholars. Like we have a professional statement in this, but beyond that, why does anyone care? And what I'm really learning is the importance of meeting audiences where they're at.
Yeah.
And so kind of trying to lean toward creating partnerships by asking, hey, what do you value? What do you want? What can we do for you that will be valuable to you, rather than an outreach model, which is sort of, we have power, we have knowledge, you're welcome.
Right?
Well, I mean, I do wonder, right, like, so from your perspective, I'd love to circle back and hear more about where you mentioned that this job is giving you a new perspective on Shakespeare. That would be, I love it. The example would be cool, but I wonder, since you're at this awesome intersection, do public audiences, I suspect yes, but do public audiences maybe have more joy in the watching than we do? Because there's that moment when you're a critic, when you're analytical.
Are you saying we're joyless
sometimes? No, sometimes, right? Because I know, like when I was an audio engineer, and you're learning all that stuff, until you learn to be able to disconnect, it robs you of the joy of the albums, the records you used to love to listen to, because all you do is analyze. And like when I did film studies, same thing early on, like you can't, the same movie you've seen 100 times, it becomes this artifact for analysis. Right. And I mean, and I will totally, my wife, like there's certain times like, no, right, you have to turn it off, right? But, no, right. We're going to enjoy it tonight. No thinking, just enjoy. Right. And I think it's like maybe the refreshing element is does that public aspect sort of maybe rekindle that joy, because you're like, you can just like it.
Yes, that's one of the things that we're learning. So this big research effort audience research effort that I'm doing, we just got back the first set of data. So this huge survey, it was like a 15-minute long survey that we sent out. It's a big lift to ask people to undertake that much time. We incentivize them to get a lottery. But the initial data that's coming back to us is that there are particular constituencies who really want to know about, who are very interested in intellectual connection that they're making. That they want that critical lens. They really value hearing experts contextualize the pieces that they are going to go to time out of their schedules to go see. But that only gets to a certain depth of engagement, and to take the next step to where people really want to make a sustained connection rather than be what we think of as a single ticket buyer, come, say this is great, and then peace out and go to some other place. People really want to invest their time in your particular theater, your particular institution. There has to be an emotional connection coming up as well, and they need to be moved. And a big part of that is having a shared experience with other people, where everyone is taking pleasure.
It's community.
It's really taking pleasure together. I mean, there have been studies that have shown that theater audiences, their heart rates sync up.
I've seen that recently.
As they're watching a piece, and so there's really something fantastic about it. You go to a play with your friends, with your loved ones, and then you make other connections while you're there, and that is the thing that sort of deepens that experience. And when we think very much about the stakes, the textual stakes, the historical stakes, the intellectual stakes, we hit people over the head a little bit too much of that. A lot of times they'll say, "Yep, that's really great. I love that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I had a nice time. I was very stimulated.
Right.
Goodbye."
Yeah, yeah, right.
And I feel like one of the things that is the key for scholars to make that public connection, to engage better with the general public, is bearing in mind that most people are not doing this for their jobs. Most people are not making it their life's work to intellectualize this. That they are in it because they feel something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you don't want to miss the part where like art can teach, right? I mean, I'm sort of reminded of like defensive policy or something, right? But at the same time, I know before I did art history in my undergrad, I could go to an art museum. I have, yeah. It took me a long time to realize I wanted to be an astronaut when I grew up.
Yeah.
But it's so weird because you could go to the museum and you're like, ooh, pretty picture. But then you take a class and you get you understand a little bit better, and then now all of a sudden the art comes alive because you understand how to make meaning.
Yeah.
And I didn't need a lot. I just needed a push, right? I needed some context, because reading a plaque will get you but so far.
Yeah.
And I feel like even in that theater space, right, you need that. But then there's that moment where all of a sudden theater space can literally become classroom, can become community space, it's a wonderful metaphor.
Well, and as you're talking, I'm thinking a lot about how what you're saying really translates into pedagogy in the classroom, and you struggle with those same things of how do I not just rely on my passion for it and me being interested in it translating to, well, I really like this, you should like it too. And how do you go beyond this is Shakespeare, you all should really like him, to
art,
exactly, developing an actual context for them to develop appreciation on the terms that are appreciable to them, to be I see, I get it.
So one of the things that I'm learning in my capacity as doing some marketing work is we're looking at click-through rates for email, we're looking at open rates, we're looking at the analytics of sales that are being completed,
right?
Ticket purchases that are being completed through those through those touch points that we have, and people are responding really well, particularly for Shakespeare, to material that can contextualizes and intellectualizes work movements. I don't know how much this would translate to other types of work that we do, because Shakespeare already has this staff that people already know what they're going in for in a lot of ways. Right. It's not a blank slate like we do for a new year.
Right.
But they want, and it seems that the ideal sort of journey for an audience member is learn something in advance so that they can have they can make meaning as they're watching. Right. Have that sort of intellectual engagement, and then really, really crave an opportunity after a show to talk about it.
Right.
Yeah. And this could be as simple as take your date to a bar afterwards and mull it over, digest it a little bit,
sure.
But also having an opportunity afterwards to talk with other audience members about what they thought. So it's moving from the intellectual to the experience itself to the community connection aspect where people can digest this.
Yeah.
Post-show salon.
Yeah.
Yes, post-show salon. What's her name? Have you also done marketing?
Yeah, no. I was in sales for years. I was in sales for a long time. Yeah.
I'm wondering, has there been any kind of thought too about how to extend this into a digital space, maybe for people who, could you have an online space where people could come back and kind of talk more about the productions and engage, on Facebook or on Twitter or wherever, especially if they might not be able to stay for this long, or maybe they're not that comfortable. But so I'm just kind of curious, is that a possibility?
That's a good question. From my academic side, yes, that'd be great. From the audience research, the audience engagement development side, I don't know. I don't have any evidence to sort of think about that. And I do think that there's something to be said for in-person
Yes.
interaction.
Yes.
That is really, really great coming out of this. But I think there can be something that's very valuable, particularly if it feels personal, feels like there's a reason that audiences would want to engage with that, where it's less about the institution and more about their having their own opportunities to express themselves.
Yeah.
So what you need is a tap room at the theater, right?
Yeah.
Because then it becomes like theater on tap. And then afterwards,
there's like drunk Shakespeare, there's stone Shakespeare, there's all these kind of like
yeah, but I think
things popping
but
up.
not even that. I mean, like those, like because I think people want to talk, but you get the shy ones, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm introverted by nature. I swear, every time I take the test,
That's
I'm
a
an
lie.
introvert. I'm
It's
an
a lie.
introvert. No, because I
Lying to our followers.
I don't recharge by having a bunch of people around. Like, leave me alone. I need my bubble. But at the same time, like if you are sort of introverted or whatever, I think the way that you start that, hey, there's not much a glass of wine can't fix in terms of opening the conversation, right? And I think, and it's community related, right? Especially if it was like round tables or, I think, again, this is engagement thing that happens when not only are you breaking down a fourth wall, right? But you also have the ability to like see people, to talk to people, to like, maybe there's discussion questions. Maybe there's like 10 cards with discussion questions. Because some people just don't know how to start a conversation.
Yeah,
here's some conversation starters.
You need someone who's willing to break the ice.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if you could do. I mean, shows have like actor and like director kind of talkbacks afterwards.
Oh my god,
things like,
audiences go bananas for those. They
Yeah.
want to understand the artistic perspective and the production choices that were made. Especially with Shakespeare, where there's so much baggage associated with it, and a lot of people know what they want. Renault and Henry V. That's it.
Yeah.
You're right.
So what happens when there is a production that upends those types of choices?
Sure.
People want to understand why.
Yeah.
Why this is different from
Why did you do that?
Yeah.
What were you thinking?
What's her name? Louis Joseph. From talking about
Yeah,
how she
Louis
left
Joseph,
out the double toil and trouble.
Yeah,
She
I always tell
staged
that.
Macbeth, and
I always
everyone's
tell that anecdote. Yeah.
Like what?
She cut out all the Middleton from Macbeth for a performance at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and audiences hated it because they're like, "This isn't Shakespeare," and it's like, actually, this is the most Shakespeare Macbeth you're gonna see. But so yeah, I always tell that anecdote in class. My students are like, "What?" Like, yes. So it is interesting that our audiences do come in with expectations to any performance, shaped by films they've seen, other performances, and I think especially with places like the Public, the Chicago Shakespeare, right, that have returning audiences, right, that have seen these performances in the past. They kind of, when you have one that turns so far away from what they've seen before, you either get kind of people love it or like, this is not what I wanted to see here. Like I remember 20 years ago and they did Midsummer and it was great, and this is horrible and a travesty. So it's interesting to kind of think about the various audiences and the expectations that they bring into any performance.
I think it's fascinating to see that blend, though, right? Where you get sort of the artistic, right? The either actor, director, right? And maybe an academic scholarly perspective. Because even when I teach, like when I do something from, say, Macbeth, like one of my favorites, and just, you can YouTube it. It's McKellen, like back in like 79 or something, right? Might be early 80s, but I feel like 79. And so Gandalf is very young still, right? And he's on the stage, or Magneto, and he's doing the tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Right? He's doing that speech, and it's like an actors forum, right?
It's,
so it's like RSC, right? Or
well,
something?
it's Playing Shakespeare. It's the John Burton set that he did,
and everybody's behind him, but he gives like one of the most powerful. Close reads I have ever heard of that. And he explains it better than any teacher ever could. And like every time I watch it, I get chills. And you're like, see, this is why actors need to explain things, right? And it was just so well done.
Well, and I like to bring that in too. I bring it when I'm teaching them about the importance of the verse in Shakespeare and how much meaning comes from the verse. I bring it because I can't ever explain it as well as John Barton thing there. Like, here's what we do, and then having them go to the here's if I just read it without any versification. oh, here's what it sounds like when I'm attentive to the meter. Yeah, now it has meaning and it pops, and you can tell what people are saying.
I have this very vivid memory of Tracy watching a video, also El Magneto.
Yeah.
Nice. McAllen's great.
Basically walking through to be or not to be, and at every moment and saying, here is why I would say it this way, because this is what, a close reading book, very much from a perspective.
Yes.
And that was, I have this vivid memory of it, because that was the moment where close reading started to make sense to me. And it was sort of opened up. Oh, it's more than just what it says.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that, like, this goes back to, like, right, the pre-conference reading.
Yeah, I was going to say, real quick, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, sorry. I'm Danielle Rosevalley, University of Buffalo. Hi.
Hi, welcome.
So we're talking a lot about kind of public Shakespeare and thinking about the theater and performance, kind of all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted.
No,
Yeah,
you
really.
know, it's. I think that it was that moment of rereading Ian Bogo's Alien Phenomenology, right? And for me, it's always chapter 4, the one on carpentry, which is basically do it, right? Go do it. Don't just think about it, do it. Right? If you're going to read Walden, great. Go build a shack next to a pond with your students and do it.
Yeah,
And, because because that's really practical. But at the same time, like your close reading examples, like for the first time it became application. Like there was a point, right? It's applied knowledge, right? It's like wisdom. It's not just knowledge. You use it. And I had a friend whose son in high school is like struggling with some science and math. Smart kid, he just struggled because like the way it's being delivered, he's not understanding. And dad's like, okay, we're going to get one of those remote control like quadcopters. We're getting all the parts, and you got to figure out the science and the math to get it in the air. And he did it because the whole point is, right, it's applied.
Yeah.
And I think in the humanities, right, we get so scared and you make it so esoteric. I'm like, no, it's not. And the minute I can help you see that this is usable and functional and like it'll move you, then it's like, hey, right, applied knowledge.
I've been really thinking about myself lately in this career transition I'm having as like an
implied practitioner.
An applied humanist, applied humanities researcher. And it becomes a lot less about content of my knowledge and much more about ethics and the how and what. Yeah. And part of that is I've been doing audience engagement, and my day-to-day, everything's about how to connect to the audience, how to want, what they like, what they respond to. It matters much less what we're saying, and a lot more how they feel it. So I think that is one of the real nuts to crack, the keys to opening up relationships between the scholarly world and the general public. That we have a lot less in terms of what we can offer and more what they can offer what an audience.
Or like, how can we serve? How about that one? Like, that's a really nice spin.
Yeah.
Here's my knowledge. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Or
When it comes to Shakespeare, a lot of it is about training. I mean, I have a practitioner background, and I do a day of acting technique with all of my literature classes because that's what they need, right? If you're not supposed to read these plays. That's not how you're supposed to encounter them. So if we're going to read these plays as a construct of my classroom, then I'd best teach you how to read them in a way that's meaningful. And sure enough, as soon as I teach that lesson, they all start to say, oh, this Shakespeare stuff is not terrible.
right, yeah. That's a good place to start, right? Well,
Improvements.
Yes.
Yeah.
I actually might be interested in like seeing it, and they start to ask good questions and they start to see it as something that is alive, and then they're like, oh, okay, I could go see a show. So I think a lot has to do with the encounters in the classroom, because that's where most people are going to encounter it the first time in their high school class.
Sure.
So how are we training the teachers to train the audience members to critically encounter these texts?
Exactly.
That's great.
Yeah.
My students have to do a scene performance throughout the semester. So they have to, the whole assignment is kind of built around the performing and then kind of reflecting on the process of approaching this as an actor and as kind of directors and dramaturgs instead of just the reader. Because it's always easy for them to say, well, the text says this. I'm like, well, yeah, but that's also like, how do you read that? How do you perform that? What does it mean to have a body on stage, acting this out? Yeah. And that's always, it's hard for them sometimes when we bring in film clips and everything, but it's hard, I think, if they haven't done it, to imagine like, what would this look like on the stage?
It's kind of another way of thinking about the no to it. It's not what we say, it's what people receive and hear and respond to. And in that case, it's more welcome, right? Like the text versus how does it perform this and interpreting it for an audience who's going to hear it.
Maybe do we need the language of like co-creating? Because I find that even in like composition classrooms, right? I'll give students the freedom to like, no, like you get to be a scholar, you get to engage and be part of the conversation. We are co-creating now.
Yeah.
And I think, there's that level of buy-in, right? Because it's not, I have nothing to give you.
Right.
Like, we are doing this together. Like, I'm not a vending machine. Right?
They don't get that. That's a foreign concept to them at the undergraduate level, at least.
Sure. Well, because when you go through standardized like high school, I mean, like that's the only method you can get because you're so overworked and underpaid. There's just not time.
Sure.
Right. But yeah, it's something magical happens. Like, no, we get to do this together, right? So it's not an I.
Yeah, I have to go.
So it's fine.
Oh, lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, yo.
Yeah, thanks for coming by and talking to us. Yeah.
Thank you. And you have our cards, yes.
And heads up, what is it? 4 p.m. on Saturday at the bar.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're interested, come. Oh yeah, we have.
Come talk about public humanities, Shakespeare.
And there's the individual one.
Making connections with audiences, stuff. We're gonna have an informal happy hour at 4 p.m. at the hotel bar in the main lobby. I apologize if this comes in 7 hours.
Nice.
Gotta make choices.
It was
True. Life's about choices.
All right. Thank you.
Well, thank you for stopping by. It's been great.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah. So we have some time left. You kind of alluded to where your focus is. You want to tell us a little more about?
Sure. So I'm in a theater department at the University of Buffalo, which is a state university in New York. But my background is as a theater practitioner, classically trained actor, and I'm a fight director. That's sort of my primary function in the theater.
Even better.
But at the same time, obviously, like I have a PhD, I've done the history work. So my classroom is very much we come at it, I mean, I have to teach literature, but we come at it from a practitioner standpoint. In a theater department, most of the students are practitioners at one level or another. So the last thing they want to be doing is reading a play.
Sure, right.
Well, and
that bothersome text.
Right.
And I think that's sort of the overall message we're getting from a lot of these things is the scholarship increasingly is moving away from that fetishization of the text as the end-all be-all way to get into Shakespeare. I mean, it's where you have to start, but it's not the only thing. And I mean, but I'm thinking about what you're talking about, that so much of my teaching of Shakespeare anymore, or even just poetry, there's many kinds. I'm like, you have to take it off the page. You have to speak it or watch someone speak it and emote, because that's the way it's not meant to be silently ingested and taken in. Like, you need to see it. There needs to be active learning there. Sorry.
I know, I'm overwhelmed. It's on the Twitter feed. I know. Somebody's going, what? So how does, I mean, as a, it's kind of being classically trained, how does that inform your teaching? How do you kind of bring that perspective into the classroom?
I mean, I wouldn't say that super informs my teaching, other than the fact that like I'm an engaging person to listen to. Not just
that's important.
But like,
that's important.
Yes, you can hear me at the back of this auditorium-sized room. Yes, I worked very hard for that ability.
Better than monotone, right? Yeah, sure.
Also, yes, I can see that you're not looking at me, and I know what that body language means.
Exactly.
But in terms of the thinking about the theatrical process, I think that has a lot of implications, because collaboration, to me, is what theater is about, and that's also what a healthy classroom is about.
Yes.
I'm not a Pez dispenser.
Well said.
It's not. I'm not Oprah. It's not you get an A and you get an A. It's we enter into this dialogue, and here are the things you need to read and do, and I've provided you with what you need to be successful at engaging in this dialogue. But the classroom learning experience to me is very much about a give and take, and what they bring and what I bring and what we can create together. So I think it's more eminently apparent in sort of that philosophy than what do you learn about teaching and learning.
Have a seat.
It was true. It was working, so I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
we're
we
live.
are
Just having a
live.
live
But
conversation.
you can join the conversation.
No, that's fine.
We have just have a rotating cast.
Yeah.
And people
We do,
come
yeah,
in
that's kind of the point.
yeah.
The excitement of live.
Yeah, right. Anything can happen.
I guess we are hitting the end of our.
Yeah,
next
we're
30
hitting the end of this 30-minute
And
burst.
so we're about to switch from live to
Recording.
and then we'll be back to live.
Yeah.
When are we back to
And then
live?
we'll finally be
11:30.
over at 12:45. So we'll be talking with Gina Bloom about the digital exhibit a little bit
Yes.
Oh, I guess so. Yeah, because it's 12 o'clock now. Wow.
more. Yes. So
Yeah, I'm gonna blame that on
Do you want to
Arizona
introduce
time.
yourself before we go?
I'm Vanessa Coronera from the University University.
Great. And what's your field? What's your interest here?
Well, I'm in the Shakespeare and early modern remediation center.
Oh.
But my larger interests are in Shakespeare and race and modern appropriations. And
Nice.
Great. The way
yes.
the way it's headed. Where
Yes,
it should be.
exactly.
Asking
So-
the big questions.
Yes.
All
All right.
right.
Well, thank you for
Thank
stopping
you,
by.
yeah.
Thanks everybody. We'll be
Very excited.
back.
We'll be live again in a
Yes.
little bit.
Live again in a bit.
Bye.